Imagine working on a project for over 5 years and you're getting close to releasing that project. Now, a member on your team starts actively promoting the fact that they have virtue signaled so hard that they've actually committed a crime. But in this admission where they them write, reminder to all Black artists out there who are looking for portfolio reviews or job advice. My DMs are open and you will always have my priority. We got too many crusty white dudes in this field. Please help me help you replace me one day. I want to go back to living in the woods. Now, this is the same art director for Obsidian who stated that they want Donald Trump supporters to feel the sting of shame for the rest of their putrid lives. So a real class act if we were going to put any kind of words to it. Now, if Matt actually really cared about this and about what he believed here, he would actually reach out to Black artists and work with them to mentor them to get them into a position where they can actually get a job at Obsidian. But when you actually then start to unpack their words, this has both white savior complex written all over it, and it's seeded with racism, and it is in and of itself so deplorable that it has to be rejected just on the merits itself.
But you know what would be a real shame? If the richest man in the world tagged another very rich man who happens to also be the head of freaking Microsoft, and they highlighted these illegal practices.
What's great about this interaction is that it actually did get the attention of Elon Musk, who was able to take this and really bring it to the surface, tagging the head of Microsoft in the process, saying,
Satya Nadella, this is illegal.
Now, obviously from this point, things started to spiral out of control as former Obsidian developer Chris Avellone got in on the action himself, stating,
based on recent news, if you were rejected from an art position at Obsidian in the past few years, well, call a lawyer. Discrimination in hiring, especially for a Microsoft studio, can ensure you don't need to apply to a job ever again.
And then even Doug Tennapal, the creator of the Earthworm Jim series, said the following.
Gamers are in a shit place because everyone loved the corporations when they paid us the big salaries. But then they all went woke. Now artists, programmers, writers, and musicians feel trapped. But the true art and innovation does not generally come from corporations. Comics, games, and music and animation came from the big people doing the small projects. Innovation lives in indies because indies have no other way to succeed. Now, looking at the small, grassrooted indies to fix our cultural mess, never bet on corporations or even rich billionaires to get us out of this. People became billionaires by investing in tractor, tire, rubber factories, not by being patrons of great indie creators. Put all of the responsibility on us to make the small, then grow big and innovate along the way.
And yet, despite all of this, despite the trends that we're seeing within the culture, we still see those out there calling on the devs to call out gamers more. And when we talk about gamers, we're talking about their customers here. As Mel Husbands writes,
Game devs need to call out gamers more often. This needs to be a popular practice. Gamers cry way too much and feel too entitled.
And to bring home the fact that we are winning in this culture war, Mel's husband follows it up with this.
Sorry guys, I just received an email from my boss saying that if I can continue to communicate online in the way that I have, then I'm going to be removed from the video game industry. Wow, man.
Reading Mel's second response really does make me feel like nature is healing, that we're getting back more to a center-minded, a common sense-minded, grassroots gaming community. And there's going to be more pushback, kind of more tantrums is the best way to describe it when I see the left react the way that they do. But that is the point, and that's one of the reasons why we want to keep making these kind of videos, to educate the market so that you guys have all the information so you can buy whatever games you want to buy. I'm not ever going to tell you that you should not buy and enjoy a game. That's not what I feel my responsibility is to you, because I think it's important that you just have the information and then you support whoever you want to support, and that is the beauty of the open market. The open market will decide the winners and losers as long as the open market is educated. Now, guys, if you enjoyed this content, if you're enjoying my approach to covering this kind of topic, I would invite you guys, if you do feel like I earn it, to hit that subscribe button. It's somewhere on the page. If you find it, sound off in the comments so I can officially welcome you to the channel. I like covering RPGs, action RPGs, and the culture war here at Ginger Prime, namely because I'm deeply anti-Marxist, and this is a fight against Marxist communists out there. Whether they actually accept or understand that that's what they're arguing for and fighting for, I think it's an important fight and a continual reminder that we need to call things what they are, as opposed to, you know, I guess shielding them with terms like woke, even though that ends up being a good definition for people. When they see the word, they instantly start to understand what it means. Now I've been seeing a pattern that happens with these games, and I want to highlight that this pattern is going on. We're going to talk about the Game Pass effect with Avowed here in this video. First and foremost, here is the pattern that I generally see that emerges with these games all throughout 2024 and leading to either disappointing sales or devastating losses for these companies. First and foremost, I write games coming out or are prepping to come out with more woke elements, not their key thing, mind you. But first, you kind of see some gamers will start to complain about one aspect of the game. The devs will then come out and say something like, this game isn't for you, or these gamers are racist, entitled, you know, insert any kind of phobe or ist that you can think to drop. And then community managers and devs will actually go on blocking sprees and setting their various different comments to private. From here, you're going to see that whether the game comes out, it's mid at best, but this also serves because legacy media tries to prop up this game any which way that they can. If it's a game that represents their team, they're going to do anything they can to astroturf and promote it and talk about it very positively. And then after about a month, they start to walk that back, trying to regain any level of credibility that they can. And then obviously you rinse and repeat. And if we look at Avowed specifically, the game is featuring preferred pronouns. The devs come out and they say they hope they make Elon Musk angry, and perhaps even Grums angry in this case. Community managers start blocking people. Community members also go to protect it. IGN and others have already started putting out very positive vibes on the game itself. So we're going to see if the pattern holds with Avowed. And then Grums chimes in with a lot of information, stating,
our director for Obsidian on Avowed wants to piss gamers off on purpose. Confirms the game is woke. Speaking of Elon, he says, just wait till you see the default, you sad little shit. He's over on Blue Sky, plugging the game to basically own the chuts, afeared of the woke mind virus.
So now that we have our history lesson out of the way, I want to talk about some of the factors that are set to impact Avowed, both positive and negative ways. Namely, you have Game Pass, you have the console war, and you also have the fact that this isn't an established IP per se. Because the assumption that Avowed is cooked, as Grums puts it,
Obsidian and Avowed are in deep trouble. Elon is posting about Obsidian's art director's potentially illegal hiring practices, tagging Microsoft's CEO. Matt Hansen's Avowed art director has become an extreme liability for the studio in his overt and open anti-white hatred. The pronoun game Avowed is cooked. Microsoft should not tolerate these DEI activists ruining their games and their products.
So now let's talk about Game Pass. Microsoft seems to be deprioritizing Game Pass somewhat from its day one releases for their standard tier, but there are still lots of Game Pass subs out there that are grandfathered into day one. And they also have announced Avowed is going to be day one on Game Pass. Now, this is going to remove a barrier for players checking out the game. So if the game is good, the wokies out there are going to have their first real Gamergate victory after having lost every game that they were promoting and astroturfing here in 2024. However, this could also work against Avowed as those promoting this ideology in video games, because if the game sucks, then you didn't
own the chuds.
But you rather woke up more people to the fact that the legacy gaming media has long been overrun by these activists and their opinions should not be trusted. The console war is also what I think is going to be the most interesting to see how it actually plays out, as this is an Xbox game studio game that will be in more places, just not on PlayStation at the moment. So I do expect that we're going to see some Sony ponies out there eventually side, even if reluctantly side, with the gamergaters who are highlighting this game's wokeness inherent to the game's design. But what's interesting about this is that, generally speaking, I tend to find more PlayStation players align more with the left. So this is going to be one of the bigger pieces of drama. Also, when I think of gamergaters, this is what I think of, a gamergator in this regards, but you guys can let me know what you think. I think it's a lot of fun. I did that for those of you who hit that like button on this video. I appreciate that support. But anyway, you're also going to have this pro Xbox camp willing and able to champion the game, because even if IGN likes to safely put most games in that 7 out of 10, well, the game's on Game Pass, and as I rightfully believe, if this was a Sony-backed game, it would easily get a point higher, because all gamers have an inherent bias towards video games and towards their platforms of preference. Now, the final factor at play here is, while Avowed isn't an existing IP, it does actually share a world with the Pillars of Eternity series, which has a decent offering, having sold over 500,000 copies in the past. But it doesn't share the same lineage as something like Dragon Age Veilguard, which was able to draw from and ultimately betray the players who supported and loved that franchise with that mess of a game. So in summary, the game won't score any points for it being a new IP, but you don't have that going for you, and the console warriors are going to generate a huge amount of attention for this game, and Game Pass will make it so that people don't have to buy the game. So in the end, the game is just going to have to be really fun for it to be a success. However, if it's just another mid game like we've seen from this past year, it's going to be easily overlooked and forgotten, and then yet another round of layoffs are going to be sure to make their way into the news cycle. Now, regarding my pushback, many tend to say,
"What's the issue? It's just an option. You don't have to select it."
And when it comes to picking your preferred, in quotes, pronouns. Now, speaking for myself, if children weren't being hurt by this ideology being exported from California, I'd be indifferent to it, in all honesty. But games are actually marketed towards all children, all across the world. And while it will always be the parents' responsibility, I do find it my responsibility to the parents to educate the market so that they can make the decision for themselves. If the market wants a game where you can pick pronouns and disconnect it from your sex, well, then you vote with your wallet. If the market doesn't want that, then it's also vote with your wallet. If the pattern holds, Avowed is shaping up to be a mid-game at best that puts ideology over gameplay, the message over fun, and this is for sure going to be one to watch to see how it plays out and to see its impact on early 2025. My fear is that if this game ends up being a huge success, developers are going to learn the wrong lesson and ignore all the data from 2024. So it's important that I at least invite you guys to continue not to support these games because of these different ideologies in them. I'd be as equally frustrated if they were trying to push, Catholic Church teaching into these games as well. Let's just keep the two things demarcated. Let's keep the preaching to a minimum, and let's focus in on gameplay over any other message or ism. Now, the thing for me making this game another easy game to skip out on is there are tons of other great games that I want to play that are in my backlog of games. Now, based off of what we've seen from this, it's a developing story, and I can say that I'm going to be an easy one to sit this one out and see what happens. All of this completely killed my hype for the game that was there. It wasn't a lot, but it was still something of interest that I was considering. But I'm also not being asked much here. I have seen some say that they've canceled their Game Pass subs because of this, and that's a fine response if you feel called to do it. I just won't be doing that at this time. But also, unless something else changes, I don't think I'm going to be pre-installing this game anytime soon. So I leave the question to you guys. Where do you fall in this Avowed mess? Are you going to be playing it because you have Game Pass? Are you going to be picking it up because it's got the message that you want to support? Neither of these are wrong options. I'm not saying you're wrong for boycotting the game or you're wrong for not boycotting the game. I just think that when it's all said and done, we have to be open, honest, willing to have these tough conversations and not try to continue to censor each other. I push back against all forms of censorship because it is a very unhealthy and very befuddling practice, because ultimately, if you're pro-censorship, eventually the censorship machine will come for you. Now, as we wrap up these videos, I always like to end on our message of hope. A thought has been appearing in my head as of recently, and this is going to sound morbid, but it is kind of true. It's like you are already dead. Now, that can sound kind of depressing, and I don't want to push anybody over any edge, because what I mean by this is that if you start to live for the end in mind, we all know, unfortunately, we're going to die at some point, and it's some people choose in that mindset to just kind of exist and not truly live. So everybody dies, but not everybody lives, is really what I kind of, drive home as we get into this holiday season. I want you to fortify yourself, exercise. I want you to also get experimental with your diet, especially if you're struggling like I've struggled for over a decade. Now finding success, now finding healing, and honestly finding just a better connection with my mental health through my diet. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one always fix, but it is a journey, and AIP is a really good place to start eliminating everything and then adding things back in and recording how you feel with those changes. I would encourage that if anybody's out there, especially struggling with deep depression, also work with your doctor, also work with a therapist. Don't think of that as any sign of weakness. Your mental health is deeply important, and I think there's a lot of connections that we might not necessarily make, because honestly, I would say that we've been lied to a huge portion of our lives. And sometimes to reprogram ourselves, to deprogram the propaganda that has been fed into us by corporate lobbying and more, well, you got to do the work. And honestly, when it comes down to it, I think you're going to save some money, because I sure did when I had to do AIP, and I'm really glad that I did. It has really helped my entire ecosystem, body, mind, and soul. The other thing I just encourage, especially when we start thinking of, living for the end of the mind, is leave it on the field. I don't want anybody out there to hurt themselves. So I would encourage you, if you're feeling like that, reach out to a friend. They would definitely like to hear your story rather than attend your funeral. So I want you to keep fighting for yourself, get radically curious about yourself and your ecosystem, and start making changes. Incremental, small, baby step changes. Those can go a long way. These small baby step changes can end up adding into big change. And what you find, and at least what I find, is momentum builds upon itself. Success builds upon itself. You don't have to go and say that you're going to do something astronomically huge, but you can start making baby steps. And all of a sudden, when you start looking back with the ability of time, you start to see how many incredible things that you've done. And I know that you have it within you to do those things, but you got to believe in yourself, because whether you say you can or you say you can't, you're right. So I would encourage you to say you can, focus in on that, and get the work in. Also have a wonderful, safe, happy holiday week, weekend, month, etc., whatever you're celebrating out there. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your time today. And hopefully I'll see you in the next video. But until then, take care.